Hello and welcome to Two Words Wolves Pod. I'm Ryan Eichten. With me today is my guest Jack Borman. Jack, how you doing?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm good. Very excited for the first two back-to-back off days the Wolves have had in a month. It's exciting.
Yeah, it's got to feel good for the players. Even the home games have felt like road games of late with all the one game stops back at Target Center.
Yeah, and selfishly for myself, there's not a preview or a game recap to like today. There's nothing. There's no. I don't think there's a Wolves article up on the site. It's it's a nice day, but we'll hop back into it here quickly because after Friday the games start coming rapid fire again. But yeah, let's talk about the Wolves' last game. They beat the Dallas Mavericks 115-114. Shout out to the people that bet Wolves -3.5. Kyrie stole that one from you guys at the buzzer. I don't know. I think you mentioned that Kyrie definitely knew the spread. I don't know if players are that in tune to that sort of thing.
I think you'd be surprised.
Yeah, but I also saw it at 4.5, like 2 seconds before. What it doesn't matter. But yeah, the Wolves pull out a win. Another clutch game. They're still. I gotta imagine they're still leading the league after another clutch game. They're 29th by my count. They're 13-16 in clutch games. So good to get a clutch win. Yeah, Jack. Overall thoughts on that one? I saw some people saying it was like if there's like a moral victory, that one is a moral loss. I don't know if I necessarily saw that, but overall kind of impression on a Wolves beating up a Maverick squad without Luka.
Yeah, hey, I think for as difficult as the season has been for the Timberwolves, just in terms of closing things out and trying to get away with wins, I don't think you're ever going to apologize for walking away with a win. And I think certainly given how many players were out for Dallas and how close they made it at the end and kind of got back into it, I just think you take that a win's a win, and you're just grateful that you're able to walk away that day 1-0. But yeah, in that game, I thought, specifically with Jaden McDaniels, it was just another really strong game for him. And I think, it is kind of the cherry on top of what I think has been maybe the most prolonged and sustained success he's ever had at the NBA level in terms of being able to impact the game in a variety of ways. I know a lot of people, are frustrated with the lack of open 3-point shots that he's knocking down. And that's certainly fair. But at the same time, I think those people also have to realize that he's doing a much better job of knocking down shots when he gets into the paint in that little short mid-range area. He's doing a much better job of finishing at the rim. He's drawing fouls and getting the free throw line at a high level right now. And certainly his rebounding has continued to tick up and up and up with each month of this season, and has been a really consistent factor on both backboards. Frankly, he's doing a much better job of corner crashing on the offensive glass, which is something we really saw him start to do somewhat consistently for the first time in the playoffs last season against Phoenix. And so for him to now kind of continue that into the regular season and be able to pay that off, I think has been huge. And then, he had what do you have? Six stocks last night, seven stocks, whatever it was. Yeah, I think it was a career high for him. So just his playmaking on both ends of the floor, I thought was really awesome to see. And and I just thought it was cool that when the Wolves were switching a lot and Jaden ended up playing off the ball near the rim, he did a really good job of impacting shots near the rim. And I think for as good as Jaden is as a defender, people really do not talk enough about how good of a rim protector he is. And I think he's arguably a better rim protector than he is an on-ball defender. And that's really saying something. And I think just speaks to the overall defensive versatility that he has. And I think when you couple that rim protection with really improved rebounding and finishing, it kind of begs the question, like, is Jaden more of a 3 or could he just be an outright 4 moving forward? And I think, really for the better part of the last few weeks, we've seen Chris Finch use Jaden McDaniels much more as a 4 than he had in earlier parts of the season. And we saw, lineups for an extended period in that game where Jaden was a 4 when Randle was at the 5, when, in the fourth quarter after Nas kind of crashed out and got benched for, getting teed up there. So, I just thought it was a really strong game from Jaden. And, and just a really great display of continued progression, and something that I think is fair to say is probably not going to go away very soon, because I think the Wolves are turning to him more and more, and putting him in lineups where he is asked to be more of a scorer. And I think that's certainly something that I've been asking for
Hmm.
the better part of the last year. So selfishly, I think it's been fun to see that, because when you just look at all the skill that he has for someone his size, you've got to find a way to tap into it somehow. And I'm glad that the Timberwolves are starting to do that.
Yeah, and without Dante, they're just going to need more scoring. They're going to need more guys to get into the paint and play make. So to see him have career high 27 points, 10 of 18 shooting, quick math in my head, that's 9 of 13 on 2-point shots. So that's great. 1 of 5 from 3, and like you said, like that's kind of been a continued issue the whole season. If they can get him into better space lineups where he's like, I think he shoots well enough where if he's the worst shooter on the court, you're doing just fine. And maybe even if he's on the court with just Rudy and Nas, like I think that's fine. It's just like when him, Randall, and Gobert are out there, so that's 2 streaky shooters plus Gobert a non-shooter, it's just really tough. So I think last game they had him in more lineups with Randall, with Nas, so that the streaky shooting isn't much of an issue. But I just think he's in a shooting slump, so I don't think it'll be this bad from 3-point all season. But like, he's not going to be a 40% 3-point shooter even on open looks necessarily. Like, so they gotta, like, McDaniels has to find ways to be effective on offense when the shot isn't going. And like the Dallas game is just a perfect example of where how he can do that. I went to Synergy to just watch back all of his points. It was pretty much every one of them was either just pushing the ball in transition, whether it's him or a teammate, or just attacking a closeout, or just getting, like you said, that short mid-range pull-up area. And then like a couple big bucket. The 1-3 he had was very big. Remember, I think they were up 1 and they put him up 4.
It
And
was
then
right
the
after
next,
Kyrie got it to 1 after that
yeah,
that Randall offensive foul on the heels of Nas kind of crashing out.
yeah, and then a possession or two later, I don't know if Dallas meant to do this or if they just lost him, but um, McDaniels was in that same weak side corner, and he was the only one on that side of the court. And his low man defender went to go help Ant, and just made a simple cut to the rim. Was the only person within like multiple feet of the basket. Easy dunk. Like, so that's just the stuff. If they're going to continue to ignore him, you got 2 options: either make jump shots, well, he's trying and they're not, it's not working, or 2, make solid cuts. When you have the ball, like, I think in general, when you see a good shooter, when they get an open look, they pump fake and drive. That's kind of like, no, you just take the shot, take the half contested 3. Well, with Jaden, I think he's the opposite. Pump fake, if you can get a step on your defender and make a play from there, that's kind of what they're looking for him. And then, like you said, he led them in with 8 rebounds last night, 4 blocks, 3 steals. That's a career high. Stocks for those, and the 4 blocks was a season high. So they're just gonna and looking big picture, like they just need Jaden to end up being a very good NBA player, fringe all-star, if the Wolves are going to kind of get back to title contention.
Yeah, no question about it. I think, there's a very real path to Jaden being, either the second or third most impactful player on this team for the rest of the season. No question about it. And it's on Jaden really to continue what he's been doing. I think a lot of it is just the manner in which he's playing, rather than the outright production itself. I think, outside of the rebounds, that's really the only production in a box score that I really care about, frankly. You want him to continue to get downhill the way he has. You want to continue to see him, cut from the corners the way that he has, especially, learning to cut off of Randall more. If
Mm-hmm.
Randall's going to be here for the rest of the season, I think that was something that he really excelled with Carl last year. I mean, you look at the 2-man pairings for Jaden last year. Carl was number 1 by far, and Jaden really struggled when Carl was out with the meniscus injury. So I think for Jaden, learning how to cut off of other bigs and just other players that he's playing with, I think is really important, because that's a next evolution for his game. Because I think you see that, the Timberwolves are a team that for the majority of this season has struggled to move without the basketball and create easy scoring opportunities for themselves. And Jaden is certainly the guy who has the most potential to be dynamic as an off the ball cutter, as far as scoring goes, and certainly we've seen that from him throughout this stretch that he's on, and hopefully he continues it because it's been fun. And again, I think there's a very real path to Jaden McDaniels averaging 17 or 20 points a game, and whether it's the rest of this season, next season, whatever the case may be. I certainly think there's a real path because he's way too talented to not eventually tap into scoring the ball at that level for a entire season, if not a significant portion of a season.
Yeah, I agree. It's kind of like, to oversimplify it, like what is like the worst case scenario for Jaden would be like a player like Isaac Okoro, where they just like can't. The Cavs have a really hard time. A good player, but like the Cavs have a hard time keeping him on the court in playoff scenarios because teams just ignore him. And then obviously like Mikal Bridges has obviously always been like the ceiling for what Jaden can be. And at times it's been up and down this season. But I agree with you, like in the sense of not necessarily looking at the stats, especially like his 3-point shooting stuff. I just think that is what it is. Maybe he can get in the lab, whatever lab Ant got in, and raise your 3-point possession. If Ant's Steph Curry, maybe Jaden can somehow become as Klay Thompson. That is obviously would be a miracle. But
Maybe Harrison Barnes.
Yeah, well, at this point, I think with Jaden's 3-point shooting, you'd probably take H Barnes. But yeah, I thought he played fantastic, and like the biggest thing was like just attacking the rim, getting to because he's just so long. Like there's someone reposted a good picture of him like next to Joe Ingles, who's a good 6'7", 6'8", and he's a good couple inches taller than him.
He's 7 feet tall. I will yell that from the mountaintops. He's taller than Karl Anthony Towns. I saw the two of them stand next to each other in the locker room several times. I think Jaden's taller than Karl, and whatever he's listed at, be damned. I'll die on that hill.
Probably has longer wingspan too. Cat does have a bit more pounds of muscle and size on him there, but yeah, I mean, like obviously the fun quote for Wolves fans is I don't remember what exactly Ant said, but we don't have Kevin Durant, but we got Jaden McDaniels. It felt like that in the playoffs. I think like Game 7, we all remember Cat kind of saving them. Well, Jaden had the tied for team high in points that night too, on a night where Ant didn't quite have it. Other guys didn't have it. So that's the guy they need. Jaden was fantastic all playoffs, and kind of haven't seen it on the defensive end. I do like your assertion, like playing him more minutes at the 4. Just with the roster makeup, it's hard to kind of get to those minutes sometimes because they have 3 bigs that need to play. But as Rudy kind of continues to struggle and his minutes kind of lower, that you're going to need Jaden to play power forward minutes. And like you said, Jaden as a low man has been fantastic. And so especially without Dante, and taking Jaden off ball probably complements Ant. You don't want Ant on whatever team's best player. Like, I don't think you want Ant guarding Jamal Murray all night, but like, Ant, if Ant has the defensive strength, it is one-on-one defense where if you're having him off ball, like I think he had to guard Steph that one game, coupled with Dante out, that isn't the best matchup for Ant because he can often get lost off ball. So maybe taking Jaden off ball gives more responsibility for Ant in that area, which kind of improves his defensive stuff too. So, yeah, the other guy that had a great night against the Mavericks was Mike Conley, coming off probably one of his worst games in Memphis. Conley, 18 points, 6 of 9, field goals, 4 of 6 from 3, team high, plus 19. Chase Frederick sent out a good stat, kind of echoed by Finch. Wolves are now 19-2 when Mike has a positive plus minus in the game. 19-2. The extrapolated out to a whole season, that's going to set the wins record. So basically, Mike has been a barometer. When Mike plays well, or when lineups with Mike plays well, they win, which kind of reminds you of last year. Mike was such a big part of what they were doing. And like when Mike would go out, they would just be starved for offensive structure. And I guess that's just kind of held true this year, that they need Mike. And unfortunately, Mike hasn't been able to give them as much this year. But what did you think about Mike's play? Because like the cliche or the dumb Twitter speak is like Mike is washed. And I do think, I mean, he's 30, he's on the far side of his career. He's going to be 5%, at least 5% worse every year. That's just how aging works. But like, where do you think Mike is at? How much is like the wrist bothering him, or what can they get from Mike the rest of the year?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing with Mike is you just need him to be aggressive. I think when Mike Conley is aggressive, not again like aggressive is kind of scalable
Yeah.
to each player and what their role is, right? So when Mike Conley is aggressive in his role, meaning that if he's even remotely somewhat open from three, like he should shoot it almost every single time. Like I don't really care what his 3-point percentage this year has been. We all know that. Like I don't think anybody that sees Mike Conley taking a 3-point shot that looks to be in rhythm, I don't think anyone's thinking that that's a bad shot.
Right.
And the better games that Mike has had have been when he's just confidently let it rip from three, whether that's in the pick and roll game, the handoff game, spotting up, um, things like that. I think when he gets run off the line and he has to play more inside the arc, that's when things become a little bit more problematic. But for Mike, I thought that he was really good on the defensive end of the floor last night as well, and played a big part in helping the Wolves get out and run and transition, and really helped get Ant going in that third quarter. He had 8 points in that third quarter. I think had 2 or 3 more assists in that third quarter as well, with a couple of them going to Ant. And I think that his energy really, I think, just helped the Wolves build that lead. And then from there, came back in and was a really steady hand for the Timberwolves down the stretch of that game when they were running a lot of structured offense. They got the ball to Ant and Julius and in advantageous situations. And then, when they weren't able, or, when they wanted to do something different, they ran, good, solid, structured set offense. And that was really important. I mean, when Mike was out there, they had an offensive rating of 142 last night in his minutes. And the Timberwolves, turnover percentage this year is like 15.5%, bottom 6, bottom 7 in the league. And when he was out there last night, their turnover percentage was like 7.5, which is awesome. It's like I think the best turnover percentage in the NBA this season is probably around 11%, 11, somewhere in between 11 and 12%. And for that to be all the way down at 7 is awesome. And I think really speaks to just the offense having good spacing and good rhythm, and doing a good job of blending, playing in transition with just moving it offensively and finding some flow on that end of the floor. So I think for Mike, it's all just about being aggressive, and when he's aggressive and guys are finding him and they know that he's willing and wanting to shoot and be impactful as a shooter and a scorer, I think it completely changes how defenses have to play. I think we've certainly seen that when Dante has started for Mike. I thought that was a good move, just because with the way the defenses were loading up on Ant in the paint, it's just so much harder to do that when you have someone like Dante, who's a really, really strong 3-point shooter and is really willing and ready to just let it fly from 2, 3, 4, 5 feet behind the 3-point line, and can knock it down at a 45% clip, but can also, a little bit more effectively play off the catch and get downhill and make reads from there. And so I think the more that Mike is able to knock down those threes, the less they're going to, play in the gaps on Ant. And if they do play in the gaps, then, he'll have some 3-point shots that he can step into and be aggressive. So I just think when Mike's got it rolling, it's kind of a best of both worlds in terms of, Ant's really able to let the defense dictate how he's playing. And, on nights when they're in the gaps, Mike's going to probably be able to shoot 5, 6, 7, 8 threes. And if he can continue to knock down 2, 3, sometimes even 4 or 5 a game, that's just going to be such a huge lift for, Wolves team that is certainly on the need for any type of scoring they can get now with DiVincenzo being out.
Yeah, and Finch has said like multiple times at pressers, like Mike needs to look to be aggressive. Like you said, it's relative. What is aggressive for Mike is passive for Ant. So like that's like kind of the scalability you talk about. But like they just need him. They're just desperate for like, and maybe all teams are, for like competent point guard minutes. Especially even with Dante in, who isn't necessarily like a pure point guard. And so like they've gotten it from Rob here and there. And obviously like we'll talk about Rob, but like you're in the short term, a 19-year-old point guard, a small 19-year-old point guard isn't necessarily who you're going to rely on for more than 20 minutes a night. But they need Mike to be close to what he was last year. I've been surprised. Like their best action last year was a Mike Rudy pick and roll, and that has just kind of been gone this year. Maybe Mike has something to do with that. I would probably guess it's been Rudy that has been the bigger aspect of that. But maybe if they can get back some of that. I don't know. It's just like it's been weird that like their best action from last year is just like gone. Although I mean, overall offense, they are 16th compared to 17th last year, so they haven't really dropped offensively. Probably gained a few, just chucking more threes has helped that. But like you said, like Mike being aggressive, you don't want him to be too aggressive, obviously, because there's Ant or other players that need the ball. But like you said, without Dante, they need guard minutes that are competent, and hopefully we get more games like the Dallas one and fewer games like the kind of the stinker against Memphis. All right, we can move on to the next topic. One thing I've been kind of tracking recently is Anthony Edwards' 2-point percentage. His 3-point shooting obviously has just been bananas all season, like Steph Curry type numbers. And in fact, good chance on Saturday night he takes over the all-time Timberwolves lead for 3-point makes. He's 3 away. I won't be at that game, so selfishly I'm hoping for like just 2 makes and we'll break it on Monday. But I doubt if that's true, they probably lose to Denver. So maybe I'll take the sacrifice there. But his 2-point percentage is just crazy low. So the past 3 seasons combined on 2-point shots, he's made them at a 51.5% clip. This year he's 45.4%. So that's what, a 6% drop? Like, maybe I need to go back and watch like a bunch of his 2-pointers, but I'm kind of I still can't quite figure out like why they're happening. I went into like where his 2-point shots are coming from, and his percentage of 2-point shots from like at the rim, just away from the rim, like the distribution is all similar to last year. He's just making them less, and he's taking less of them overall because he's taking a bunch of 3-point shots. I asked Finch like what is going into that, and he kind of, I don't have the exact quote, but he said he's just got to make his layups. And so I think a certain part of that is true. Like he's just got to make his shots. But what do you think has gone into that? If you have any good ideas?
Yeah, I mean, and shooting 64% at the rim. That's not a problematic percentage by any means. I mean, last year he shot 71% at the rim. And his first 2 years he was 65, 66, then he was 67, 71, and now back to I guess career low 64%. But again, that's not a terrible number for how much heat he's taking at the rim. I think a big thing for me is just that a significantly lower percentage of his attempts are coming at the rim. Like 20, almost a fourth of his shot attempts came at the rim last season, and this season it's down to 16%, and that's nothing to sneeze at. In terms of just how often he's getting to the rim relative to where he's getting all of his shots. Outside of that, obviously his 3-point attempt rate is kind of replaced a decent amount of that in terms of, last year, 34% of his shots were threes. Now it's 49% of his shots. So that's obviously a huge uptick for him there. And that's probably where you're seeing some of that, being replaced. But again, I just think it speaks to the spacing element of it too. I think Ant's seeing 2 and 3 and 4 defenders at times, and there's just so much more traffic, and a lot more of those shots inside the arc are contested. And while I certainly think that there's merit to Ant missing some bunnies that he should make, I think that's probably the difference between him shooting maybe 64% at the rim and 66%. Or I don't think it's a drastic change. I don't think that that's the main driver of it for me. I just think some of it too is his shot selection, in terms of on nights where he doesn't necessarily have it and he is able to get kind of somewhat into the teeth of the defense. He just is taking a lot tougher shots too, which is part of it for me. And I think whether it's a lack of trust in your teammates when you're getting into the paint and looking to kick it out, or or it's just he feels like he needs to make his imprint on games when he hasn't necessarily had the jump shot going. It's kind of a conundrum that I think if anyone really truly had the answers for it, I think there would probably be better results at this point. But yeah, I think the number one thing for me is just spacing. I think Ant definitely shoots better at the rim when teams generally play him straight up. I think we've seen that, and um, in a few of these games that he's had recently, where teams have decided to play him straight up, like against the Knicks team, they totally decided to play him straight up, and he was 4 of 8 on twos in that game. And I think in some cases it's when opposing teams have a star defender or someone like that they trust to just leave him on an island with Ant. They aren't playing in the gaps as much. It's a little bit easier for him to get inside, and so you see that against a team like Memphis or a team like Cleveland or a team like New York, where he's really found success of late, which has been good to see. And so I think for Ant, it's just about continuing to be aggressive and getting downhill and being able to change speeds and just be physical, because if he can continue this shooting uptick that he's had, and free throws for him, 28 free throws or 26 free throws, in the last 2 games, and having 2 games of 10 plus free throw attempts in the last 5, I think is super important for him. So it's just playing with physicality, and I think just trying to be a little smarter about when you try to drive all the way in and get a shot up versus trying to kick it out. And I think for him, it's just some of those decision making things as a playmaker that he's still got to improve. And hopefully I know with Ant the progression is not always going to be linear, but hopefully I guess the slope can be a little bit more positive maybe than over a 5 or 10 game stretch here and there over what we've seen of late.
Yeah, your free throw, you point out the free throws, and I kind of thinking about it now. That's an interesting point, because I remember looking at the peak of Ant complaining about the officials. I don't remember when it was. It was about a month ago. He obviously had the big blow up that got him the big fine. He was shooting like 3.8 free throw attempts, and I don't want to dig into the actual like what he was saying or go into an official talk or whatever, but like he was shooting less free throws. I
think it was he and Wemby were the only two averaging 25 a game that weren't shooting more than 5 free throws a game.
Yeah,
I think was a stat that was a thing.
For whatever reason, and if you listening at home want to talk about the officials, great, good for you. But like, he wasn't shooting as many free throws, so like I think it obviously was like a frustration about that, and like that's gone up. Like now he was at 3.8 like a month ago, and now he's at 5 now. So I don't feel like looking up like what it's been. You mentioned it's been a bunch over the past few games, but like he's getting to the line again at the rate you'd expect him to. So that should tick up. That should help his 2-point field goal percentage. Like you said, like the shot distribution, like it feels like what the 3-point shots have taken away or kind of some of the shots at the rim. And ideally, if we can maybe push some of those mid-range shots closer to the basket, that would help out. So I think it's like a mix of like getting to the line more, having a better shot distribution, and then also, like Finch has said, just make shots. Like make shots at the rim. I mean, it's a cliche, but like any problem you can kind of think of can be half solved by just making open shots.
And I think some of it too, like he's looking for a foul, like he goes up and is yelling, "Hey ref," instead of just trying to focus on finishing the shot. So I certainly think that I'd like to see him just try to finish the shot instead of trying to yell at the refs while he's mid shot. For sure. That's probably my other critique that I didn't mention initially. But yeah, I think it's just better decision making in terms of when to pass versus when to shoot. And then once you can kind of consistently string together some of those better decisions, it's just the confidence with doing that.
Yeah. And I talked about when it happened. There was a good month-long stretch where Ant was just like not playing like himself. And especially like on 2-point shots, he was just not himself. And that has not been the case the past few weeks. So I would expect maybe it's like this is a sign of like if the 3-point shot isn't going away, which I don't think maybe it won't be this crazy high, 42% on nearly 10 attempts. Maybe there's a slight downgrade. No, of course. But I'm saying if he shoots 41% the rest of the year, that'd be great, which is less than what he's at. But like if he can just, like you said, just start making layups. Like that just seems like low hanging fruit to like, or just start taking layups. Like you said, 16% at the rim. Like that just, for a player like Ant, that's too high or too low, excuse me. Yeah, I mean, the 3-point shots were always going to lower his 2-point percentage just by shot distribution. I just think it's like, this is a bit more extreme than should be happening. And so I guess the question is it baked into the numbers, or is it just a random sample? I don't know. Next topic I had written down here, Rob Dillingham had a rough game against Dallas, played 9 minutes, most of that in the first half, just missed his couple open shots, had a pretty rough turnover. And I thought, like, rightfully didn't get many minutes in that game. It's not like to come down on him, and they were attacking him defensively as all teams do. But I want to talk about Dillingham because I just kind of think this is kind of could or should be his role. Like on nights where he's not playing well or the matchup doesn't favor him, he won't get many minutes. But then, like, you look at a night against Memphis where he's just rolling, he's their best point guard on the floor. I know everyone said it, but like he should have closed that game. He was just playing better than Mike. Like we state the stat of them being winning that much when Mike is positive. Well, that also means when Mike is negative that they're losing a bunch. And so I just think, like, when Mike is 1 of 6 from the floor for the game, I think Rob should start. So do you agree with me that, like, Rob should be, like, the amount of run he got in Dallas was fine because he wasn't playing well, but on the flip side, he needs more run when he is cooking?
I think Rob Dillingham should be starting for this team. I know that I am on an island when I say that I do not care at all what happens the rest of this season from a wins and losses perspective. If they make it to the playoffs, great. Obviously, I think you'd hope that they'd make the playoffs, because even if they do flip Randle for 2 different expirings or whatever the case may be, I still think you've got enough to be able to get to the playoffs. And even with that, like, I don't think that you should try to just chase as many wins as you can right now if that means playing less minutes for Rob Dillingham and not starting Naz Reid, or not playing Naz Reid 30 plus minutes a game. Because I wouldn't feel great about paying Naz Reid, $30 million a year or $25 million a year, whatever you're going to pay him, if he hasn't even started yet. Like, this whole season was a wash to me if Rob Dillingham hasn't played super meaningful minutes and Naz Reid hasn't been a starter or been like top 5 in minutes. And they haven't done either of those things yet. And at this point, like, I think you got to start prioritizing that. And I think you've got to start with this season taking a long look at, what are the guys that are going to be on the team long term? I think right now, with a bullet, the only 4 guys that you can say are going to be on the team long term are Ant, Jaden, Naz, and Rob. Those 4 guys. So you need to think to yourself, if you're in the Timberwolves front office, the Timberwolves coaching staff, is how I would go about it, is saying, what do I need to do to optimize the environment in which we are evaluating which guys are going to be with those 4 for the long haul? And that starts to me with starting Rob Dillingham. I mean, I love Mike Conley. I would take a bullet for Mike Conley, but at the same time, like, I think that he would probably understand, like, hey, look, this season is what it is, and we definitely don't have enough to go win a title or make another super deep playoff run as we're presently constructed, especially without Dante. And again, this is assuming that Dante DiVincenzo is going to miss the rest of the year, because that's kind of what it seems like it's trending towards. So if Dante is going to miss the rest of the year, or almost the entire year, like, you just want to start like a 37 or 38-year-old point guard to just try to get into the first round. Like, I think there could be merit to the fact that Rob starting and playing significant minutes wouldn't even really be the difference of 2 or 3 wins. I think that once you get Rob going with some confidence, and once you got him some significant minutes in that Knicks game, okay, he played with a ton of confidence, and then he carried it over in the next 2 games and played great. And obviously didn't play well in the Dallas game. But look, if you're going to have if you're going to play 4 games in a row and 3 of them are going to be really productive or net neutral or positive, you'd certainly take that for someone with Rob Dillingham's background. And again, I think it's just about the long term at this point. Like, what can you do to make this year more of a 1 step back for 3 steps forward, or 1 step back for 2 steps forward type of thing, rather than, just playing a bunch of minutes for Mike Conley and Julius Randle if they're not going to be part of the long-term plans here. Because then you're really wasting the season. And so for me, I'd love to see more of Rob Dillingham, just because I think the more dynamic of a guard you can put next to Ant, the better things are going to be. Just because I think the more honest it's going to keep the defense, and ultimately too, like, the more engaged it's going to keep everyone else on the floor. I think Rob gives his teammates a ton of energy when he's playing well. You can tell that Ant loves when Rob gets it going and is playing with, some flair. And this is kind of what happened with Naz Reid when Naz Reid first was trying to get into the rotation. Is he brought a ton of energy and flair, and the fans loved it, and his teammates loved it, and everyone kind of fed off of that. And so the more that you can give that to a team like the Wolves right now, that on some nights, like especially at the start of games, there's more energy at a funeral home than there is at these games. I think, at least putting Rob Dillingham in would make things a little bit more exciting, for better or worse in terms of the basketball product.
Yeah, I think the Dante injury certainly is the swing. If you're going to try to make whatever a run is, you're going to need Dante.
Totally.
And we don't know what the injury status is. It's not I have not talked to anyone, but like the idea of they announced the grade 3 toe sprain and that he's going to get reevaluated, and that has now been a week or so since that came out, or a few days. Like, that doesn't promote confidence in what is going on there, but that is totally speculative. They might come out and say, yeah, two months will be back before the end of, we don't know. But like you said, certainly that is a possibility, or like not necessarily even out for the season, maybe isn't likely, but certainly out the rest of the regular season is more than a possibility.
It's a 2 to 6 month injury, depending on if you need surgery, because a grade 3 toe sprain, like, there's torn ligaments in your toe.
Right.
So
but I'm just saying 2.5 months is like the end of April or the beginning of April. So you'd have him back.
And then you'd need, he's going to be on a minutes restriction. So it's really, add at least 2 weeks to get back to full go after that. And then
you're looking at a cat timeline from last year. It's fairly similar. But if it's like, the middle of that, if it's 3 months, 3.5 months, now he's coming back in a playoff series, and that's kind of untenable. So I agree with you that, like, the priorities need to shift from trying to maximize every single win every single night to what do we have on this roster for next year. And that doesn't mean that you're punting on this year, because like you also said, like, they have enough talent to do that while also winning enough to make the playoffs and have a competitive, like, my goal the rest of the season is finish in the top 7 after the plan. Get into a winnable playoff series.
Totally.
Because if you're the 8 seed, you're toast. OKC is just way better than you. And if you're the 7 seed, like, if you win that first round of playoff series, you're going to have Houston, Memphis, probably, or as it stands now, that's not winnable. It's certainly more winnable than OKC. Those two teams are two teams they've played well this year, like when the Wolves have played them. So, like, elite, you get a better look. And, like, to me, I value that. I value getting Ant a playoff series, because I feel like every time you get him in the playoffs, he learns something new. And so, like, that needs to be, I think, almost just making the playoffs might be my priority one for that. Because I think, like, the stuff you talk about, figuring out what you have, like, 5 playoff games almost gives you even more than whatever 40-something regular season games. But I don't necessarily agree with you starting Rob as the best role, because I just don't think he's ready. But certainly having him play, like, every single minute Mike is on the bench, that is something I would look into doing more so, and having him be like a firm part of the rotation. So, like, when he's playing poorly against Dallas, he's up closer to 12 to 15 minutes And when he plays well against like Memphis, instead of 17, he's at 20, 25, 30. That is kind of what I would like to see. And like you said, like with Nas, I don't know if they can start Nas with Randle still on the roster. Certainly, they have not shown the willingness to do that before the deadline. Maybe that changes after the deadline if Randle is still here. But I do agree with your larger point. Like even if you fix you turn injuries off and Dante's healthy, this is just not like a dream. Like I would almost still say like making the Western Conference Finals is possible in the sense of Houston and Memphis aren't world beaters and you could theoretically make a run, but like that's like the 99th percentile, where last year like the 99th percentile was hoisting the thing. And it just feels like, I mean, what, they're going to be 40% chance to beat any of those teams, and that feels high. So like you're sitting at 16% to make the West Finals. Like it's not that high. It's like, I don't know. I agree with you that it's a, like you need to focus on what do we have. Like if you're going to pay Nas a lot of money, is he a starting caliber player in this league on a championship level team or a playoff caliber team, or is he more of a like his role last year? Is he a six man? Because to me, whichever version of that he is, should come with a different price point.
No question.
But ultimately, I think, when is the deadline? 2 weeks from now. They kind of need to decide on what direction they're going for themselves. And then once they do decide if Randle, we can kind of transition into, we kind of already touched on what we think the big picture of this roster is. But like, I guess we can talk about trades. One last thing talking about like the big picture. Like what can they get out of Rudy? It's been a very confusing season from Rudy Gobert. How much is his, what was he questionable with, an ankle? How much is that bothering him? Because that seems like an easy kind of scapegoat. Why isn't he rebounding? Well, he's got this ankle thing. I don't think that's certainly all the blame, but like, his defensive rebound, Gleeman tweeted it out. Like his,
defensive rebound percentage is career low.
It's just a career low, and it's been really dropping every season since he got here. Now, the first two were probably due to playing with Cat next to him, and Cat took a bunch of defensive rebounds, so it's not exactly it's apples to apples from Utah days. But like this year, you would think, well, Cat's gone, it should go up, not down. And he just hasn't, and he hasn't been the same defensively. We talked about the pick and roll with Mike Conley. What do you think? Is this who Rudy is? Is he washed? It's just been a confusing season. What have you thought about Rudy's play?
Yeah, I think that one's certainly more concerning to me, considering, what his extension number is. I'll be honest, like I thought that number was pretty high and too high when it came across the wire. Like I get why they did it. Rudy was fantastic all year last year, and has been really important for this team having a really high floor because of how much space he creates for Ant as a screener, and obviously how good of a defensive player he's been. But my thing for Rudy is he's just doing a lot of ball watching on the defensive glass, where he's not trying to find a body. He's not trying to box anyone out. He's just kind of jumping straight up, and guys that are bigger and more physical and stronger than him are just kind of wedging and getting offensive rebounds. And he's doing a lot of trying to tap the ball to someone else rather than trying to grab it himself. I think that's certainly been a point of frustration for myself and, certainly a lot of other fans. But I think the rebounding thing is the most concerning thing to me. I still think he's done a really good job on the defensive end of the floor this year. I mean, his numbers of just rim deterrence have, remained excellent this season. And I'm really not as concerned with his defensive impact because I think a lot of those defensive numbers as well had to do with him not exactly trusting Julius Randle as the low man in the scheme at the start of the year. And they kind of had to switch up, instead of Rudy playing a little higher up at the level where he could be more of a playmaker, which is what he did last season because he trusted Karl as the low man. He had to play in a little bit of a deeper drop. And, I think that definitely hurt some of his defensive impact metrics earlier on in the season. And I think he's certainly gotten better as a defender, and the Timberwolves and their schemes have gotten better just as, Randall's played harder and got more comfortable, and they've, had a lot more lineup combinations with Nas at the 4 and Jaden at the 4 with with Rudy out there and trying to pair, Nah and Rudy together and getting some Nah, Jaden, Rudy minutes. So I'm less concerned about the defense. I certainly am concerned about the rebounding piece of it. I think that's been the main concern for me. I think, certainly it's been helpful that Jaden and to a certain extent and Randle, really Randle's been much better the last 2-3 weeks as a rebounder, especially. So I think, again, if anything, if Rudy taking a step back on defense kind of forces everyone to um, be a little bit more intentional about helping on the glass. Like, I mean, that may end up being kind of a good thing or a blessing in disguise that it forces everyone else to raise their level. But again, like, part of having Rudy Gobert and paying him all that money is so that, guys don't have to do that as much. So again, I think, I don't know what the solution is necessarily, but for him, I think it just starts with trying to get a body on guys more and trying to just go up and grab rebounds instead of tipping them. But hey, maybe that's just him having a more self-awareness thing that, like, hey, I can't grab or corral all these rebounds because my hands aren't that great. But again, like, that's also something he's been doing his entire career. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I think, I haven't heard too much on the injury front because we certainly heard a lot about that 2 years ago when it was much more apparent. Just watching the game, I don't think he looks like he's not moving with a whole lot of confidence necessarily. And until he really misses a game because of something, I don't think it's necessarily fair to put a whole lot of stock into it, especially if it's a lower body thing.
Yep, for sure. And Finch just like talked about his rebounding all season, and I just gotta grab it, man. Like, I get his hands aren't great, but like, just there was the one at the end of the game last night where he just kind of
Totally.
tips it right to Dallas, and it didn't end up mattering because the Bulls made enough free throws. But like,
And I was
there's
just
been a
playing
lot of
devil's
games.
advocate with the tipping thing. Like, I 100% agree, and I'm on the side of just go grab the ball, dude. But maybe that's just what his
I there,
internal.
if you go and grab the ball and drop it, like, it almost feels better than a lot of the tips he's had, because it just kind of, it's like the idiom, don't save the ball underneath your own basket. It's like, well, don't, unless you're actively, I mean, there's times to tip the ball, like when you obviously have a teammate right there, you can tip it to him, that's great, but like, don't just randomly tip it under your own basket. Like, there's going to be a Maverick standing right there to put it back in. We can kind of wrap up with like some trade discussion. That's upcoming here, and it's kind of ramped up on the trade machines are getting worn out here. Randall's obviously I kind of think, like, in general, Randall's been the scapegoat for this whole thing. It's not to say he hasn't played poorly or his game hasn't caused issues, but like, to the degree, like Kendrick Perkins was like that. The Towns trade is could be the worst trade ever, and it's just like, no, like, that's just terrible. Like, the Brooklyn Nets just handed the Celtics the title. Like, the two guys, Tatum and Brown, came from the same damn trade. No, it's not close to worst trade ever. But like, I don't like, my big thing is like always been like, the Towns trade has had less to do with the season not going right than I think people assume. Certainly Cat would help, but like, Julius is far less the problem than I think people assume. But also, he's the easiest like trade piece, similar to Cat. Like, I thought, like, when the Wolves wouldn't play well in the past and people would come down to Cat, it was like, I don't think Cat is the issue as much as people like to say, but he was the easy trade piece. So I guess, what do you think about a Randall trade? What would you want to see? And maybe are there other different, like, how do they want to just kind of totally punt this season and look to trade Nikhil if they don't want him back next year?
Yeah, I think again, it comes back to what I was saying earlier about the Timberwolves need to decide what type of environment they want to evaluate these guys in. And just from like a statistical lens, or statistics lens, and more qualitative lens, like, you want the environment in which you're, analyzing your subjects to be, as clear and unbiased and optimized as possible. And in the NBA, it may be legitimately impossible to have, no bias or an optimal environment, just because there's so many different variables that you have to account for. But I think, again, like trying to get in as much spacing as you can, trying to get Nas and Rob as much spacing as you can are all really important things just in order to evaluate how their skills on the offensive end all mesh together. Because I think we all kind of realize those guys' calling cards are all on the offensive end of the floor. And, same with Julius. And like, I just don't necessarily think he's a fit with those guys quite as much, even if, some of Julius's, impact metrics have been pretty strong this year, especially with when he's on the floor just with Ant. But yeah, I think the thing with Julius, I think like the biggest argument for keeping him beyond the trade deadline and having him, even with the risk of him opting in next year, is that you're able to kind of preserve that salary slot of being able to bring in another guy that's in that 15 to $25 million range, even if Nas gets a contract that's 25, 27 million, and you're just assuming that you're going to be a high first apron, low second apron team for the next few years.
Mm-hmm.
And there's certainly merit to that in terms of, maybe you could trade Randall as an expiring and get more for him, or maybe not necessarily get more for him, but other teams might be more willing to get involved in that discussion once they know that he's taken that player option for sure. So the uncertainty doesn't make planning a little bit more difficult if you're any prospective team trading for him. But I think that I would trade for him because I do think that there are enough teams around the league that, at least could be willing to acquire him for the sake of, decluttering some of the rotations. Like, I think, Chicago is certainly an interesting place that you could try to get him to fit when you consider that, Lonzo is not a guy that's going to be a long-term fit there. They're trying to, put the ball in Matas Buzelis's hands a little bit more down the stretch of this season, and being able to have a little bit more of a physical guy there. If they're going to keep Levine, I think it kind of balances things a little bit more so that you can have Kobe White and Levine, Buzelis, Randle. I think is kind of an interesting group of players, and would fit too alongside Vucevic pretty well. If they do end up keeping Vucevic, so I think that's a team that would be an interesting trade partner for the Wolves, if that's something that they want to end up doing. But again, I would just trade him just so you could for sure clear up more minutes for Nas, and then I'll also try to get more minutes for whether it's Rob Dillingham or Josh Minot or someone like that. Because again, even if those guys are playing bigger minutes, I still think you've got enough to make the playoffs. And that feels kind of like the bare minimum to me at this point, is like, just make the playoffs. And I do think that this team would still make the playoffs if Rob Dillingham started 70% of the games for the rest of the season, and Mike Conley started 30% of them, or Dante DiVincenzo, when he comes back, if he comes back, starts all of them. But that's kind of where my head's at. And then again too, like, if you're the Wolves, and maybe you get in on, you get in on the Jimmy Butler trade,
Mm-hmm.
where you help as a facilitator. Maybe it's a situation where, you could send, and you're sending out Randall just as a a contract that helps kind of balance the scales, which is certainly possible. And there's certainly scenarios in which he fits in that construct, where, maybe
Right.
you could get from Phoenix the 2025 first round pick back, that
Although
they now have.
The Phoenix pick is going to be Cleveland.
I know. But as part of that, you send Nickeil Alexander-Walker and the Jazz's unprotected, 2025 second, which the Wolves have this year. You package those two, and then as part of that, Utah amends the favorable, least favorable to, be the Wolves just getting their own pick back. So then that way, even if they don't make the playoffs, or, they only end up being a first round exit, then they still have, another first round pick that they'd be able to theoretically backfill Nickeil with, or, or Randall, or however the roster shakes out at the end of the season.
Yeah, I think the first trade domino, and I'm almost refreshing Twitter just to make sure no one got traded while we're recording here, is Jimmy. which from a Wolves lens, it's kind of funny, like listening to kind of Heat media or Heat fans, how similar that situation is to the one when he was here. Just hearing them complain about like just all the things the Wolves fans are complaining about, it's the same thing. It's it's just like they're so confused, like why he would do this, or we're like, yeah, I mean, if Jimmy's gonna do this to like Pat Riley, like I think he'd be willing to do this to anyone. But I think once that domino falls, like whether the Wolves if they can get into that, like a trade, I don't think Miami wants Beal, so like they need a third team to like try to get players back. So like I know like the Bucks want, or that's been a thing, like Beal to the Bucks with. The Wolves can't get Jimmy. I think that's like kind of a misnomer. Like they're unless they like fully dump Randle into cap space to get under an apron to then, but like Jimmy makes more than Randle, so there's like in the Wolves can't aggregate salary, so there's like no, like I keep seeing people like even jokingly say like they can't do it.
They can if they get under the first apron, or if they get under the second apron, and then
right.
You would have to put Jaden and Nas and
Right.
Mike in the same thing, and then you'd get
Right.
you could do it, but it's not happening.
It's theoretically possible, but like practically, like I think people assume they could trade Randall and Nikhil for Jimmy or whatever no, they can't do. They can't. It's like the main thing of the second apron. You can't do. You cannot aggregate contracts. One thing I found, you can't do like a 3-team trade but that's the whole thing. Doesn't matter. But yeah, so like Beal would be going to a third team, whether it's like Milwaukee, and then Randall, and then different pieces are going to Miami. I don't know if Miami wants Randall, then I think that's an easy kind of trade.
And they were rumored to be interested in him as one of the interested parties before the Wolves traded for him. I think it was them, and then it was the Pistons, and I think maybe the Bulls were the third team there. So
yeah. And then I think the last kind of aspect of this, and it's something no one myself included, wants to talk about, is the ownership situation. How much luxury tax do they want to pay whoever they is in terms of who even owns the team? Right, the second it's technically Glenn is the manager. I know just A-Rod and Laurie are confident that they're going to win it, but of course they are. That's why they have pushed and not given up. So I don't know which group would want to pay more luxury tax. If they want to avoid luxury tax, even just this year, trading Randall is probably an easy way to cut $10 million of salary, $5 million of salary, which double dips into the luxury tax. I know I've heard that it's not going to be settled until after the deadline. So in terms of that, I guess it's Glenn's call ultimately on stuff like this. But yeah, that's another wrench.
I don't think you'd have to twist Glenn's arm to lower the luxury tax bill, considering that was certainly part of the calculus when they traded Carl away, was that they wanted to have less long-term money committed and not pay quite as much this year.
Yeah, well, and trading Carl reduced their short-term bill as well. And trading Randall, theoretically, they could, fully match his salary. But I think in kind of looking at even saving like $5 million saves, I don't know the exact number, but saves 10 plus off a bill. And before the season, I would have kind of railed at that for a team that theoretically had championship upside as just like terrible ownership. But while it's still not my money, so you spend it, great. But like, there's also a little part of me that I get it. Especially if Glenn's not going to be potentially owning the team next year. I'd like to think that at least, while it won't be settled, that mentally they will have known what's going on. But maybe that's bad. Maybe if Glenn knows that he's losing before he's actually lost, maybe that's the worst case scenario.
There's certainly an argument to be made for that.
So maybe this thing lingering past the deadline is good, but because the last thing we need is Glenn making some move and then Alex and A-Rod saying, well, we're actually the team, and now we have more lawsuits. And yeah, so that's the scary part. I guess we can end it there on the lowest possible note. But yeah, I still got a few more games to the deadline. Maybe, hey, they win a bunch of games and they're looking great, and that makes the trade situation differently. I guess the flip side of the coin is also true. yeah, Jack, what you got going on? Stuff to plug? What you got?
Yeah, after almost every single Timberwolves game going live, Locked On Minnesota YouTube channel. So come check out me and my man Luke Inman over there, and check out Ben Beacon on the Locked On Wolves podcast, and he's awesome. I love chopping it up with Ben. He fills in for Luke from time to time, and is always a blast to talk to. So. And you can also find all of our podcasts if you don't watch them live on YouTube. You can get them in the Locked On Wolves audio feed as well. Normally up a couple hours after the Timberwolves games, if not the next morning. So
Awesome, yeah. But for my pod, Leo and I will be back next week, and then in the next week or two, I'll have another guy that records with you guys over there at Locked On. Andrew Dukowitz will be on with me here in a week or two as well. So that's another kind of connection we have to the Locked On Network. But for me and Jack, thanks for listening. And we'll see you next week.